Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
Mike Freeman.
Tyler Gould, how we doing?
Good, man. Here we are on another night of the richest men in town, and tonight was a good night, man. We had
it's a good night. It's good night. It's one of my friends, right?
One of your friends, Mike Burke.
I don't know if he's a friend now after I make him do the podcast, but yeah.
Yeah, well, he's at least a close acquaintance still. We could classify him as that. But Mike Burke came on, and he's got quite a story to tell. And first, let me ask you this, Mike. What caught your attention with Mike Burke, and why did you think he'd be a good candidate for the richest men in town?
So when you hear Mike Burke, and listeners will probably catch this pretty quick, you hear passion. You hear passion. You hear a man doing something that he is passionate about doing. And, I went into this conversation thinking that Mike Burke was a builder, and I admire and respect builders. I try to surround myself with builders. I think I say later on in this podcast, Mike Burke is a rebuilder.
Yeah.
Mike Burke has a skill set, and Mike Burke has learned some things that have put him in a position to help rebuild people's lives. And I really, really hope that our listeners feel that as they spend some time with him tonight.
Yeah. I wrote down a few things that Mike said, and a couple things. He says, look for what's good in people. We all have a purpose in the world, and we all have a reason to be here. I mean, if we can just say that sort of sets the tone for what this podcast is all about. And Mike delivers, and he expounds on those three thoughts.
Oh, he really straight up teaches. It's almost like we need a whiteboard, right?
Yeah.
Or a slide deck. Give me some slides.
I wasn't joking with Mike after the show. I said I've got 6 pages of notes, and I do have 6 pages of notes, and it's pretty phenomenal stuff. Mike's doing some great things in his community, and he's really looking out for the ones that really need looking out for. And he's really dialed into the youth of the community and to the children of the community, and just he is invested in making things better. And that was inspiring with Mike.
Yeah, he raises the youth. He raises the profile. He raises their value. And I think I'm going to add that to that ingredient of a richest men in town lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing to encourage the rising generation? Yeah. I think that's an important part of living that lifestyle. And he models it. I mean, he takes us to school. And I don't know if I've ever done this before, but like, yes, listeners, listen to the podcast, but listeners, check out the show notes, because there's going to be some resources in there. There's some book titles in there. There's some worksheets, right? We always talk about applying and what are we going to do with the things that our guests teach us. Our guest is giving us tools to actually help us turn up hope in our lives and in the lives that we interact with. I mean, that's worth the price of admission.
Yeah. I mean, Mike is, we talk a lot about hope in this podcast, in our past episodes. Mike actually talks about the theory of hope and the science of hope. And he teaches the components that allow people to obtain hope. And that was almost a powerful thing for me.
Yeah. Almost like a formula, right?
Yeah.
Almost like you could go to Mike's episode and be like, I'm struggling. I feel low on hope right now. And you can look and say, okay, then I need to maybe do something in this aspect. Or maybe I need to be a little more mindful in my agency, right? Yeah. Or maybe work on re-goaling. Like, who does that? Hope before talking to Mike Burke is this abstract thing out in the ether.
Right.
Talking to him, it's like it's as real as baking a cake.
Absolutely. 2 + 2 = 4. I mean, it is. Mike's got it dialed in. And I think it's important because we talk a lot about the theory of hope, right? We've had guests that have brought up the idea of hope, but I think if people can listen to Mike Burke and walk away with that formula to not only for themselves, but to teach that to someone else, I mean, that's a powerful thing.
Yeah. The thing is, like, okay, we get on this show, and let's be real, Tyler, every once in a while we make stuff up. Right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Come on. Right.
Mike Burke comes at you with the data behind it.
Yeah.
He comes at you with authors of researchers of resources that you can back it up. It is the science of hope.
Yeah. Mike runs an organization in Shasta County called Pathways to Hope for Children. And we will have the links in the show notes for people to see what he's doing in Shasta County. But, in this podcast, we talk with Mike about that these organizations exist all over. And so no matter where you're listening from, there's organizations like this that you can be involved in. If you don't find that, please refer to the show notes. And
yeah, there's a Hope Alliance.
Yeah.
Nationwide network international of organizations, right?
Yeah. So lots of good stuff tonight. I mean, we could go on and break this down all night about all the great things that Mike said. But please, when you sit down tonight and you listen to Mike Burke talk about hope and talk about seeing the good in others, put that into practice. Let's be peddlers of hope as members of the town. Let's push that out there and let people see that there's hope to be had and there's a way for them to obtain it.
Yeah, right. Like it's a great time to be in the hope business.
Yeah. This was good. This was special for a lot of reasons. Mike Burke made this extra special. This was our 50th episode.
50.
So congratulations to you, Mike Freeman, for sticking with me for 50 episodes. Not many people can do that.
Let's hang a couple zeros on that bad boy.
Let's do it. Tonight was a good night. Enjoy your time tonight with Mike Burke on The Richest Men in Town.
Hey, can we chat about a line that I want to do a little bit of psychoanalysis on Tyler Gould.
Yes, let's
little text exchange this morning.
Yeah.
Right? You say I should probably get it right, huh? I should probably pull this
if you're gonna quote me, yeah, let's
I should probably pull this up. But I kind of dig. It was very almost like you cut Tyler Gould open and there's this core belief.
I say many things on text messages, some more true than others.
I'm not beholden to one person. Like that entrepreneurial, independent spirit, like nobody has a claim on me kind of thing. Like I'm going to do what I need to do to provide for my family. And I'm not beholden to no one.
Yeah, that's true, man. I believe that.
I kind of dig that. And I'm curious, where does that come from? Because that sounds like 8 siblings, you're number 8, and there's no food left growing up, right? And so now it's like early on, it's like, all right, I got to take care of me. Nobody's going to take care of me.
Yeah.
I got to do it.
So here's where that comes from, honestly, most of my adult life, I've been an entrepreneur. I've worked for myself. And when you work for yourself, things change dramatically, right? You learn real quick that the hustle is 24/7 and you're only getting paid for the work that you do, and nobody's going to do you any favors. So in the hustle, you've got to be ready to scrap it out and do the work, man. So
I don't mean to be like, you're not the guest, you're the host of the show, but we kind of we kind of break some guests down, and we get into that.
Yeah.
Where does that entrepreneurial thing come in? I mean, are you in 7th grade and you're like, I'm working for me? Like, where does that come?
Probably because my dad was really entrepreneurial. He worked for himself for a lot of years. So, most of his life, that was what I saw, was him working for himself. So, and he's a worker, man. He's a hard worker. So, so that sort of is, you kind of pick that up, the hustle, you pick that up, but yeah, and then plus, and I've worked for other people, and I've always felt like, loyalty it really doesn't exist to the level that we'd like it to in the regular working man's world, right? So you're as good as your last sale, you're as good as your last conversation, you're as good as your last lesson that you taught. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like those kind of things I think about that all the time. And when at some point, you work your way up to a certain point and you're making good money, and maybe it's cheaper to hire 3 guys that are less experienced, but they can do your job. So, I'm always thinking about where the next spoonful of sugar is coming from. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, well, plus, those texts were being fired off about 5:00 this morning. So, you never. It's always a little hazy at that time.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on that? When you tell me what came to mind when you read that?
Well, the thought is, it takes something to step out without a safety net. Like I remember, you have a classroom teacher, right? You have a gig, and you've got that tenure thing, and I'm not going to go there, but like when you step into admin, you don't have that.
Yeah.
Right? You lose that. And you got to get into that results and pressure and that kind of thing. And I just think to myself, I just think of some of the conversations that we've had with other guests, and it's just a fascinating that entrepreneurial spirit, that mindset. Like, do you think of George Bailey?
Yeah.
George Bailey wore that building alone.
Yeah.
Everywhere he went. Right. And the pressures of that and providing for that. I mean, that's really what leads him to the bridge. Right.
But the thing that is too, there is that. Yeah. I mean, there's been times where I've been in the office at 2 a.m, man, working, just stressing out. But there's also something to be said too for that feeling of something that you built, and something that you're building. Maybe not built. I don't know that it's ever built. You're just constantly in a building phase. But I think if you have that, I don't think you necessarily have to be an entrepreneur to experience that, because, if you're in a gig, working for a company, you've got to have that mindset anyway. Like, how do you, so I was listening to Mark Cuban talk years ago, and he was talking about, I think he made his first bunch of money, inventing like a online radio station that played college sports, right? And he was talking about his experience of trying to get that to work and going in and meeting with someone, and they said, well, do you know how to make that happen? And and he was like, yeah, I definitely do. And then he said, when he left the meeting, he went straight to the library and checked out some books on how to make that happen. And so I've always appreciated that, and I can tell you, man, there's a lot of times where I'm sitting in meetings and we're discussing things, and the question is, well, can you make that happen? And my answer is, yeah, absolutely, we can make that happen. And then you walk out and go, now, how are we gonna make that happen? Like, how's that gonna work? I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's the fun of life to a certain degree. So,
well, let me tell you, I'm excited about our guest tonight. He is Mr. Hope. So Michael Burke, is going to be with us, and he's coming to us. He's the executive director of an organization here called Pathways to Hope.
Yeah.
We're going to get into that. There's a story even in the organization's name, but you talk about building something, and you talk about building lives, right? And building a community. I've been quoted as saying, I'm quoting someone else that said, the universe is made up of two people. There are builders and there are murmurers, right? And I think we're going to learn tonight about builders.
I love that idea. I was thinking about Michael Burke today, and I came across a quote by Winston Churchill. He says, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." And as I read that today, I was thinking, man, Michael Burke's, he's double dipping, man. He's in there making a living by giving, and I'm excited to hear what he's got going and his story. I mean, this is going to be a fun night.
Yeah. Talking about giving, crazy situation tonight. That's why I'm kind of running a little frantic. I end up Good News Rescue Mission tonight. Turns out someone calls my work and is like, "Hey, anybody speak Spanish there?" We're an office of education, right? We're like, we don't have anyone that can translate.
Right.
They come to me and they say, "Hey, do you speak Spanish? You want to talk to this person?" And there was someone at the Good News Rescue Mission that's been there 3 years and can't get the help that they need. And I go into that space. I don't know if you've been in a space like that recently, right? But I mean, tonight we're going to talk about hope. There's some people out there that could use the hope that Michael Burke knows about, right? Michael Burke knows about hope as a science. He can actually turn it up, right?
This is what I'm talking about, man.
Let's go. Right?
Let's go. Let's do this. Let's get Michael in the room and have that thing cranked up to 11, and let's get jamming on hope. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine, right? Like we talk about superpowers. Can you imagine a superpower that you have the ability to turn up hope? Michael Burke, how are you? How are you, man?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys this
Good. Evening? Welcome to the richest men in town.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to spend the next little time chatting with you guys and getting to know you better too.
So Tyler, we geek out about this stuff. We nerd out about this podcast, and I think that's kind of why we dedicate so much time to it.
Yeah.
And like our wives are looking at us like, "Why are you doing this thing?" I've looked at this date on the calendar with anticipation, talking to Michael Burke for quite a while.
Yeah.
Right. I love all our guests. Hey, to the 49 before us, right? Love all our guests.
Number 50.
This is episode 50. Hats off to you, Tyler Gould. But
it's a big deal, Michael. You are ringing in a milestone of sorts, I think. So, and we're excited to have you be the one on number 50.
That's right.
That's an accomplishment for you guys getting to 50. Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to take that because I think the average podcast lasts 6 episodes.
Yeah.
So I'll take that. But it's for so many reasons. Today is an opportunity for us to talk about a precious commodity called hope. And Michael, like I've heard you speak, and every time I've heard you speak, it's like, get this guy on the show already, right? So we're excited to have you here. I think that's a word we kind of throw around and maybe misunderstand sometimes or misapply it. So I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk to you a little bit. But Tyler, let me tell you why I love me some Michael Burke.
Yeah,
right?
Please.
I've had an opportunity to try my hand at building lives, right? Trying to be of influence. I was recently in this activity where we had these circles. We had a circle of control, a circle of influence, and a circle of concern. And the person would throw out a situation, and you would present the circle that you think would be appropriate to that situation. I'm a crazy optimist, and every time I ended up grabbing the circle of influence, right? We could be talking about sea turtles in Mexico. I'm like, oh yeah, I could influence that, right? Like, no, you can't, right? But when I see the work that Mike and his group are doing, I stumble on almost like a silver bullet. like I know that that's kind of a cliche thing. There is no such thing as solving, someone comes to me with a simple solution to a complex problem. I'm like, no, you got to go back to the lab and rethink that, right? I think it's a little more complicated than that. But when it comes to what Mike does and the work that Mike's group does and who he works with, I really think tonight we're going to be looking at a silver bullet for our own personal lives, and then even into the community that we exist in, right? Mike and I have the opportunity to be in the same part of town, and Tyler's joining us from the other end of a really long state, right? But we've got people, Michael Burke. I don't know if you've got some relatives in Ireland. We are huge in Dublin.
Are you huge? Well, Burke is an Irish name. There's more Burkes in Ireland than there are Smiths in America, I heard.
Wow.
So I don't know what is going on in Ireland. We'll do a shout out to Ireland right now. Here's what happens. Every Monday, we drop a new episode at 6:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
So is that 9 hours?
That is 2 a.m. Dublin time. We get downloads at 2 a.m. I don't know if the pubs are closed or what's going on.
It's the soothing tones of Mike Freeman to get you home after a pub crawl. You know what I
mean? Dublin, Ireland is listening, Mike. So we're excited to have you. Before you jumped in, we were talking about building. We were talking about taking risks. Tyler is an entrepreneur. I am a government employee, right? Those are two different levels of risk, right? And we get into a little bit of like why Tyler does what Tyler does. Mike, why do you do what you do?
Well, that's a good question. So I kind of got into this work, much like you, Mike, I think as an influencer. So I started out my career as a journalist, and I was a photojournalist for a newspaper for over 14 years. And I learned in that 14 years, as a photojournalist, you have to make a connection in 30 seconds or less, or you're not getting the picture and you're not going to tell the story. And what I learned being a journalist is people will let you into their lives and tell you things and show you things that you wouldn't normally show or tell other people because you cared to listen, or you cared to ask the question, or you held the title as journalist. And so in my journey of being a journalist, you couldn't be involved with anything. You had to be neutral. And I was very strong in my journalistic ethic. And maybe I can't say it very well, but I was strong in it. And I believe that as a journalist, you had to look at both sides and you had to be impartial. But I mean,
that's the training, right?
Right.
That's how you were trained. Got it.
Absolutely. From high school on. I mean, I started doing photography in 8th grade. And I really hung my hat around being a photographer. And as I transitioned careers, that was a struggle to let go of that title. And I haven't really let go of the title. There's a camera over my shoulder here. I'm never too far from it. But going back to that connection in 30 seconds or less, and it taught me how to love people. And it taught me how to love the human experience and understand that everybody's complicated and everybody has something going on. And really, everybody has a story to tell. And I was always curious about what that story was and how I could flesh it out. I remember just personally, I wanted to see what the best views in Reading were. So I went up to a reporter and I go, let's do a story on rooms with a view. And we went to all the best houses in Reading in Shasta County, and we got to see things, and we got in because of our titles, but we got to meet these people and learn about why the view is important. I mean, that's just a simple little thing, but I mean, I dove into people's lives as a hobo. You know, there was one guy who was a clown for the Moose Lodge Clown Club. His name was Ernie Sequeira. And I met him in the early 90s, and he totally influenced my life because he was the first one I really did a photo story on. I spent months with this guy, and he dressed as a hobo, and he'd go and he entertained kids. Another really powerful story was AIDS. You know, AIDS was a big thing in the early 90s. And I took a picture of a woman, Teresa Daly, standing over her own grave. She went to her gravesite where it had her husband's name, and it had a beginning and an end date. And then it had her name, and it had a beginning date. And here she was standing over her own grave talking to her dead husband. And it was just so powerful to be let into somebody's life like that. So I think that really influenced who I am today, and this ability to want to work in a career where I'm learning about children and lives of people and parents, and trying to help show them just a different way.
So Mike, I love it. And I want to, let's let the audience in for a second about what it is that you do now in your work with children. Let's give them a little peek at that, and then we'll circle back on how this thing came to be.
Well, we'll fast forward then to May of 2019, which is when I took the job as the executive director of the Shasta County Child Abuse Prevention Coordinating Council, and it's a mouthful. Yeah. And so what that organization does and did is help provide parent partners for families with children ages 0 to 17 that were struggling or having some issues around parenting skills. And maybe some of our clients would come to us from children's services where we were an intervention to help them not lose their children to the system. But more than that, it was just a way to really invest in youth. I mean, our mission is a community that values youth, and that's a beautiful thing, right? So that's what I'm doing now. Immediately upon taking the job, I looked at the name, because not only is it a mouthful, it's what in hope theory we call an avoidance goal. And we'll talk more about hope theory later, but an avoidance goal, although it's a positive outcome, it's kind of not a positive way to get there. Child abuse prevention. So the first thing I did within months is just ask my staff, what do you think of the name? I asked our people who work, what do you think of the name? And they didn't like it. We're not child abuse people. We didn't abuse our child, and they shut down at that. They forget about the prevention. So the first thing we did is we renamed it to Pathways to Hope for Children. And so that's our DBA now. And so I'm executive director of Pathways to Hope for Children.
Wow. So imagine you work for that Child Abuse Prevention Coordinating Council, something like that. Mm-hmm. And you knock on the door, and that's how you're introducing yourself to families.
Yeah.
And so you're just getting walls.
It's a turnoff right away, right?
Immediately defensive, right?
Yep. That's what I was hearing from the employees. They weren't proud of the name of the place they worked. Guess what? Now they buy their own shirts. I'm not wearing one, but now they buy their own shirts that say hope on them. They're so proud of where they work now about the name of our organization. But yeah, it was a turnoff. And our clients would tell us, oh, I'm not a child abuser. We couldn't help our community at the same capacity we're helping it now with our previous name. It was a great name for the time. It really was. It brought us up, and that name was in the books for more than 20 years. And there's child abuse prevention coordinating councils all over the state of California, all over the nation, right? This is Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month in April, but it's still an avoidance goal. It's still not what people's potential are.
So what is the goal that you're trying? What are you trying to build through the work that you're doing with?
Well, we're trying to stick with our mission where our community values our youth. So our goal is that youth feel valued. I recently stumbled upon this old thought that I had, or this memory, that children should be seen and not heard. I heard that a lot as a child, not from my mom or my immediate family, but I heard that saying, right? Did you guys hear that when you were little? Right?
Oh, yeah.
It's a saying, children should be seen and not heard. What a horrible thing. Yeah. What an awful thing. People listening to this podcast take away one thing: don't say that anymore, because children should be heard and children should be celebrated. They're amazing people, and they're training to be adults. And what we know is that 75% of the children say that grow up in a domestic violence home grow up to be perpetrators or victims. So if you're telling them they should be seen and not heard, and nobody's listening, they're just going to follow what they've been taught.
So Mike, what's, you hear it all the time, like what's in a name, right? What's the importance of a name? I love the transition from the mouthful that I can't remember.
There you go.
To Pathways to Hope. Can you give us a little bit of the thought that went into that name and why it's meaningful to you and to the organization?
Sure. And that takes us on kind of a little bit of different journey here, but the reason Pathways to Hope for Children, it is based on the science of hope. So going back to 2010, I left my job. I was doing, I went from newspapers to mentoring for a year. And then from mentoring, I went to the hospital and I worked up for Dignity Health as a marketing and media coordinator for 7 years. And then this opportunity came to be an influencer, to put together pieces of puzzles. And I started the Shasta Family Justice Center, which was a co-located service center for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse. In that journey, we started another program called Camp Hope. At the time, it was just Camp Hope. It was based on a San Diego model, and Casey Gwinn founded Camp Hope San Diego in 2003, and it went on till 2008 when a fire burned down their camp. Well, in 2012, we did Camp Hope again. We invited Casey Gwinn up. This journey is outlined in a book called Cheering for the Children that Casey wrote. And we then did something that changed my life forever, and that was Camp Hope. And I got to see that year, the very first year. I mean, it was crazy. 70 or 86 kids and 25 counselors is just a crazy time, but it was 5 days that changed my life forever. And Casey came up to our camp that year. And the next year we started Camp Hope America. It was actually Camp Hope California. Camp Hope America came in 2015. But as it went down this journey of Camp Hope California, where we were bringing kids from San Diego, from the Bay Area, from Sacramento, from Redding to a Camp Hope, we started measuring the science of hope. And there is a man named Chan Hellman we were introduced to, and Chan Hellman is, to me, the leading hope theorist in the country, and kind of explained this concept of what hope is. And hope is the belief your future can be brighter than your past, and you take a role in making that happen. So in the first part of that statement, hope is the belief your future can be brighter than your past. That's just optimism, right? You see it in school, Mike. You see it with what you do with the kids, but you take a role in making that happen, turns it into the science of hope. So when you look at my future is brighter than my past, and I take a role in making that happen, what makes up hope? And Chan's taught me in the readings I've done and what I've learned from Casey, hope is made up of three things. It's goal setting, and then it's having the agency, or willpower is a better way to put it, the willpower to achieve that goal, and then having the pathway or the way power to get there. So the reason it's often called agency, and I've heard the word agency said a lot, like, do you have the agency to do that? And so sometimes people think agency, like Pathways to Hope is an agency, or Shasta County Office of Education is an agency. That's not the agency we're talking about. It's the internal motivation to get something done. So when you have this theory called hope, or the science of hope, you have goal setting, agency, and pathway. And so when we looked at the name of our organization, we looked at what were we trying to do? What is the opposite of what is a positive goal of child abuse prevention? A more futuristic or positive goal is Pathways to Hope for children. So we know the science of hope is goal setting, agency, and pathway. So our organization is purposely called Pathways to Hope for Children, because we are a part of that, and we're teaching children and working with children and parents on how to be that agency. The hardest thing for me to learn to inspire people is agency. I knew coming back in 2019 and looking at the landscape of our community, what it looked like prior to me leaving, because I went to work in my journey, we'll get there, but I went to work for Alliance for Hope International and Casey Gwinn and Gail Strack, traveled around the country talking about Camp Hope and strangulation assaults and starting co-located service centers. That's a journey that was all part of this hope journey for me. And when I came back into the community, I saw, wow, we are a community rich with pathways. We have so many avenues for people to go down. You do in Southern California, we do in Redding. I mean, SCOE has a ton of them. We have our organization, we have First Five Shasta, we have so many pathways, but what's going to motivate the people to go down that road? And that's the agency piece.
I want to dive so deep into like the science of hope, man. So I'm gonna pump the brakes for a second, Mike, because I just
love that. I love the intentionality. I love the power of words.
Yeah.
Right? I love the idea too. It's almost like it's almost like Mother Teresa's quote, right? Like if you're all about loving people, or if you're judging people, you have no room to love them. Mm-hmm. And when you come in with that perspective, it's almost like, hey, we're partners, right? Yeah. Like we're just trying to be part of your solution.
You know what I love is this, when we talk, we throw out the word hope, right? And you talk about hope. And I think sometimes, depending on the situation you find yourself in, that word can sound unattainable, right? Yes. That it's out there. Some people have it. I might not, and I don't know how to obtain it. I'm fascinated by this idea of hope theory and a science of hope. To me, that means that, hey, if you do these things, or if you follow this prescribed formula, we can get to a place where hope is within reach, right? Or hope can become a reality for you. I love that idea, Mike.
Well, and contrast that, if you cut his definition in half, that's the stuff of fairy godmothers.
Yeah.
Right? That's Tinkerbell. She's going to come and we're going to wave a wand and everything's going to be
brighter than my past.
Right. Yeah. But when you add that and you can do something about it.
Well, and then you have that intentionality of goal setting, willpower, and a pathway. I mean, that's powerful stuff.
And when you think about it, so if you go back to this thought of, everybody talking about hope, Tyler, you mentioned that, like, I hope this, I hope that, what's this, we all want hope, and hope's a good word, and hope's been out there for a very long time, that word. But if you think about it, Chan says this: a goal without a pathway is a wish. So when you think about that, I always use this analogy. I could really want to go out and play at the snow and make a snow angel right now. I could have a goal of making a snow angel at this very minute. I could have the agency of making a snow angel at this very minute. We've all seen A Christmas Story. Remember the little kid? I can't put my arms down. I can't put my... And he's dressed like all up for snow, right? That kid had or the mom had agency for that kid. But I have no pathway. I go out and I plop my back down. I'm going to crack my skull open on the concrete because there's no snow. So I really wish I could make a snow angel now, but I don't hope it. I can't hope it because I don't have a pathway towards that wish, towards that goal. So it becomes a wish. So when I say to you, I hope you have a nice day, I'm really saying, I wish you have a nice day.
I love that. I think
is that your pet peeve, Mike? Does that drive you crazy?
No, it doesn't drive me crazy because most people don't know, but I just listen different.
Yeah.
When someone says the word hope to me, I think goal setting agency pathway, goal setting agency pathway. And I mean, maybe it's a sickness. I don't know. It's just like when I drive around, I'm still a photographer. I look for little moments in life that I would photograph if I was still working for a newspaper. It's just the way I look at the world is different now because this science has come into my being and really into my work.
Okay. So let's get into young Mike Burke, because here's what I'm curious about. I love the photojournalism. And then we get into, it sounds like we get into maybe some marketing.
Yeah.
But then you somewhere a superpower is turned on, right? Or somewhere you become like a protector. It sounds like you immediately go into a family justice.
Or unveiled, Mike, right? Because I got to believe that there's a kernel of that somewhere, right?
That's the hypothesis, right? That's the hypothesis.
I don't know where it came from. I know what the reasoning is truly, my wife, Roxanne, has really allowed for me to explore. She's a stable force in my life. When I became a dad, I realized that journalism wasn't quite the right role for me anymore. And I searched probably for the next 5, 7 years, 10 years to find out what that next path, what that next passion was. And I loved doing the mentoring. I just wasn't sustainable as a dad or a husband. Working at the hospital was a great job. I made really good money for Reading, but this drive or this need to be invested in the community, my wife saw it. She actually brought home the flyer that said, the Family Justice Center is looking for a founding director. And I applied for, I was a long shot, guys, for that job. I mean, there was a shoo-in that Angela McClure wanted to have in that job. She was currently the project manager, but I knew the DA, and I'd done some work around developmental assets with the district attorney and a couple of other people on the boards. And I just went in with my authentic self, and they gave me the job. And that really did lead me to where I'm at today. And it led me to a passion of helping children.
So, Mike, let's turn the dial way back, and let's look at, can we talk about you growing up and sort of the what your home was like, and sort of the influences that helped shape young Mike into, because I think it's interesting. You know, I love the idea of, you know, you said like from 8th grade you had a passion for photography, right? And can we talk about kind of where that comes from? And let's start at the beginning. What that life looked like for young Mike growing up.
Well, the very beginning, I guess I cried a lot. No, my sister tried to feed me, and no. So, you know, early on, I mean, my mom's always raised us under the fact that be successful, but do what you want to do. Life's too short not to enjoy what you're doing. So find something you really like. And, you know, photography was a long shot. You know, there's not that many photojournalists in the world. There's even less now. But at the time, I was able to get a job at the Record Searchlight here in Reading. But really, I was always raised with the idea we could accomplish anything, and we should pursue our passions, you know, from my grandma to my mom and all the way up. So I think early Mike was the kid who had a few great friends that were really important. Some of my best friend, Mark and Wyke from my 3rd grade and 5th grade, are still friends of mine. You know, they go way back. And I just was always told I could do it. And so I don't think nothing held me back that way. My mom and dad got divorced probably when I was about 14 or 13 years old. And, you know, so I lived with my mom. My dad was a man of the time, you know, Clint Eastwood style. You know, he drank, he smoked, he so he was an interesting fella for sure. But I really think that my early influences were this idea of you can do what you need to do. And so go, you know, do what makes you happy. I think that's what it was.
Yeah. And it was, and there was no barriers
there. No, there really wasn't a lot of barriers put in my way. I mean, I grew up in Daly City at the time. We weren't a wealthy family. You know, I was an average student. My kids rocket over me being a student. I was a C student for sure. And
let's talk about kids real quick. What are your ages?
So I have a 26-year-old who's living in Portland, Kelsey. Annalise is 23, and she is living in the Davis area. And my son Robert is 18, just turned 18, and he's a senior at Shasta High School.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
My wife Roxanne and I are celebrating 20 years of marriage this coming June.
Hey, congratulations.
Right. Yes.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal. So you grew up in Daly City, graduate high school in Daly City
Yep. Graduated high school and then moved to Santa Cruz, went to Cabrillo College in Santa Cruz for a couple of years, which was a kind of an eye opener because I left all my friends behind in Daly City, went into a place where I didn't really know people, but made some connections there that are still in my life today, but still really focused on that passion of photography and telling stories.
Can we go to that? Do you remember the first camera you got? Was it a Christmas
I got this,
or was it?
Sure. I remember the first time I really started taking pictures with my stepfather, Mark. We were doing a camping trip and he had a Canon 8E1 and he said, do you want to take some pictures, and kind of showed me the basics of it. He was a newspaper editor for the San Francisco Progress. So he was a writer in that kind of thing. So he kind of showed me a little bit of a camera, and that Christmas, they bought me a little point and shoot early for that time. I don't remember that brand, but I quickly outgrew that and got a Pentax ME Super, and had that until I could save up for my first Nikon F3, which I've bought in my senior year of high school with my first credit card, and I don't think I've been out of debt since. Camera gear is not cheap.
So, Mike, can you talk about what was the draw for photography? You know, you talk about your stepdad kind of showing you some things, but what instilled that passion in you for photography?
Well, when I started, it was really, you know, taking pictures of pretty leaves. And I remember taking pictures of bridges at sunset. And that was good. It taught me the basics of the camera. But what I really loved from really early on is just that connection with people. I mean, I can look at a pretty scene, but I actually teach a photojournalism course now out at Shasta College. I've been doing it for years. And I always tell people, show me the world in a different way. And that's what I love about photography. I want the pictures that inspire me are pictures that you can't see or you don't normally see the way you look at the world. So it's close-up pictures of people's faces, it's emotions, it's peak action in sports. It's those little things that matter. I always call my camera as my front row ticket to life. I've met presidents with it. I've flown with the Canadian snowbirds. I've been whitewater river rafting with it. I've just done everything because I had a camera. And when you have a camera, you got to be up front. So that's why I call it my front row ticket to life. But from a very early stage, I just love taking pictures of people.
I love that.
Tyler, have you guys seen the TED Talk by DeWitt Jones?
Yeah.
Okay. DeWitt Jones is a world-renowned photojournalist for National Geographic. And he talks about using his camera to celebrate what's right in the world.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
You know, like, and you hit on it, right? It's the frame through which you see, and there's good frames and then there's great frames.
And you know what? There's bad frames too. You don't get to see those though.
That would be, I think, the work I would do.
Yeah.
But I mean, I love that idea of like changing the way you even experience life, right? Mm-hmm. And you say, now you're driving around and you're looking at, the sun's going down, right? This is probably some great this or great that, or that would be a great shot. It's interesting.
All right. I remember a simple thing, like just recently driving by and seeing somebody in an alley connecting with their kid. I'm like, I'd put you on page 1 if I worked at the newspaper right now, because it was just a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
And photographs capture moments. You don't necessarily know what happens before or after that frame, but you've got that moment forever.
What does it do to you to have that source of creativity in your life? We've had guests on before and we've had architects talk about the power of creating something that did not exist, right? What are your thoughts as you think about the role that creativity has in your life?
Well, for my photography, I don't really see myself as creating moments that didn't exist. I see myself capturing moments that most people don't see in a way that they don't see it. So that's one thing I love about photographing the kids at camp. I can actually photograph joy and photograph hope. It's got a visual sense to me. And I've been at camp. I remember there was a 16-year-old trafficking victim from Oakland. And she had been through it. In the first 2 days of camp, she wouldn't talk to anybody. She was isolated by herself. And she started coming out of her shell and then sharing her experience. And then I remember her coming up to me and said, I'm going to do everything this camp has to offer. And she jumped off a 14-foot ledge into the Trinity River, and she went whitewater river rafting with her new friends. And at the end of camp, I captured this picture of her looking over her shoulder at her shirt, where every one of her new friends didn't judge her for who she was or didn't judge her for what happened to her. They judged her for who she was, and they accepted her for who she was. And she looked back with a tear down her eye as she tried to read what they wrote about her. And I captured that moment, and it lives with me. It stays with me because it's a moment I don't know that anybody else saw.
I'm listening, Mike, to some of the things that you're saying, and I feel like this idea or this passion for hope was was all along. You say things like connections through people, showing the world in a different way, capturing moments. And I can't help but think about the work you're doing with Pathways to Hope for Children. And those maybe those same phrases would apply to what you're doing now, showing the world in a different way to someone who maybe has only seen it one way, and it hasn't been the greatest up to that point.
Yeah, there's well, thanks. I think that I probably didn't realize what the name of it was, like, I didn't realize really, you kind of go through life and you go, oh, aha. Well, that's why they call them aha moments. But I agree. I think that hope piece has always kind of been there, but I didn't know it had a name, and I didn't know what to call it. And that's probably why I latched onto it so well and so deeply. And I got to witness it.
Yeah, when you talk about capturing moments and with your photography, I mean, to me, it's almost an emotional. I can feel the emotion when you talk about it, and I can, in my mind's eye, right, I can see some of these moments even though I'm not there, and I think that, man, that's a powerful medium to be able to capture. Maybe at the time there wasn't you didn't have the definition for it, but to capture hope and show those moments. You talk about seeing a mom and the child and saying, man, I want to I should have caught that on film,
Such a cool moment.
I mean, that's a beautiful.
Well, and I think, Mike, you got to be going a little crazy with how people use their phones these days, right? I mean,
teaching
taking pictures of their dinner or something, and it's like, and it's actually taking them out of the moment.
Yeah. Well, I've always had, I think there was one of Robert's favorite, my son's favorite comics said that the cell phone is like your worst best friend, right? It's always interrupted. It's like the worst person that you'd ever be around if it was your friend, because he interrupts you during anything. You're always paying attention to them, whether they like it or not, and they have no boundaries, and that's your cell phone, right? So no, it doesn't drive me crazy that people do. I mean, more pictures are taken with an iPhone, I think, than any other phone on the planet right now. So the fact that people are capturing moments, what I try to teach in my class is capture moments that matter and tell stories with them. And so, a picture of your food, that might matter to you, but it might not matter to the 150 people that like it when they actually don't really care. But that's kind of up for debate as people do it. But I do love that connection that people get close for photographs. People smile for photographs. Sometimes they're faking them. Sometimes they're real. As I said, I stood over somebody's grave with her when she was alive, and that was as real as it gets. And then you have other moments where people are really fake in front of a camera and you don't know who you're looking at.
Yeah.
Well, when I hear you talk about it with your eye, I think of a question that has come up in conversations with other guests about asking every once in a while, what are we missing? As we're going through life, what are we missing, right? In the pre-show call, you talked a little bit about just that dash.
Yeah, that kind of resonated with me. I forget what television show I was watching but they talked about it's what you do in the dash that mattered. And I remember pausing, going, what does that mean? And of course, then they immediately explained it. It might have been 6 Feet Under, which was that show on HBO about the mortician. I can't remember exactly the show, but they explained it as the dash. You have a beginning date and an end date, and your whole life is that dash on your gravestone. So make the dash matter. And that always stuck with me, like, we all have a purpose on this world. We all have a reason to be here. And what I have learned at camp and working with survivors of domestic violence all over the country, working with my staff, working with our families, is that everybody has value. Every child has value. Every adult has value. And we have to start asking what happened to you and not why did you do what you do. When we look at somebody who's committed a crime, a lot of times we ask, well, what's wrong with you? Why did you do that? It's not what happened to you that got you to this place. And that's where the adverse childhood experiences come in. And we do a lot of work around ACEs, I don't know if you've had anybody on your show talk about that, but
no, let's go
markers.
there. Let's go there.
There's 10 markers that were developed through a study out at Kaiser Permanente with Dr. Akonda and Dr. Vincent Folletti, where they looked at obesity, and they were trying to figure out why they could help a woman lose 400 pounds and then they gain that weight back immediately. And so they found out through their work that there was 10 markers that happen in a person's life that would lead to that weight gain. And so the studies went on, and the CDC got involved, and they started doing all kinds of different studies around it. And they found out that there's these 10 markers that they call adverse childhood experiences. And the more ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, you have happen to you between the ages of 0 and 18 years old, can show the trajectory or the health outcomes of your life without intervention. For example, if you have an ACE score of 6 or higher, you die 20 years early without intervention. If you have an ACE score of 4 or higher, you're 1,200 times more likely to commit suicide. And so there's these different factors. So our kids at camp, we know nationally, the average kid at camp has an ACE score of 4.4. In Shasta County, we did that study in 2015, and they had an average ACE score of 5.5.
In your Hope Camp setting.
In our Camp Hope setting with Alameda and Shasta kids only, it was 5.5. We know from doing a study in San Diego, where I was working with Casey at Alliance for Hope, it was the average ACE score in San Diego in prison was 5.5. So we know that with these, the higher the ACEs, the more likely for the risky behavior without intervention.
Scientifically proven.
And those ACE markers,
is done, if there's no intervention, if that trauma goes unmitigated in the life of that young child, you can write it.
Right. Yeah.
You can write their future.
That's what the science is showing. And Nadine Burke Harris is big into this. We just got a grant in Shasta County called ACEs Aware grant, where we're screening people for ACEs at Shasta Community Health Center. If they have a child 0 to 5, we screen the parents for their ACE score. If they have an ACE score of 4 or higher, they're referred to Pathways to Hope for Children for a case manager or parent partner to help them on that journey so they don't repeat, so that we can break that cycle of violence.
Yeah. Nadine Burke Harris has a great talk, right? A TED Talk.
Yeah.
She got a book too. I think it's called The Deepest Well.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. But she talks about, like if you're in Africa and you see village people going to the well and people are getting sick at the well, and you're not very long into that before you're asking what the heck is in that water. And that's what we are experiencing. And that's what we're learning with ACEs is like, hey, this trauma that is these kids are experiencing and they're carrying around as a result of adult trauma that's gone unmitigated is going to end their life prematurely.
Right.
It's going to lead them to drink. It's going to lead them to risky behavior. It's going to lead them to suicidal ideation, right? It's the opposite of science of hope. There is a science that has proven that, hey, these kids are dealing with some things. And like you said, what a great question. What happened to you?
Yeah. We have to start asking that. And, I was giving a presentation in Gaston County, North Carolina, where we talk about a man named Ronald Wayne Fry. I'd first seen Casey go and give this talk, and I've been able to share it also. But Ronald Wayne Fry was executed in 1903 for killing his landlord in 1991 in a rent dispute. And I told this story in Gaston County, North Carolina, and I watched a woman bury her hands into her face, and she walked out of the room within 10 seconds of seeing his picture come up on the screen. And so later I asked the judge, the sheriff, I said, why was Mary so upset? I really didn't mean to upset her. And she goes, don't worry about it. Mary's mom was an FBI profiler. And Mary had to look at that picture of Ronald Wayne Fry every day from the time she was 11 till the time she was 15, because her mom had to determine if he should die for the crimes he committed. And you know what? He should. And he did. Well, the same day he was executed in North Carolina, a picture of Ronald Wayne Fry at 9 years old was in a police training manual to show what child abuse looked like. He was terrified. You could see it in his eyes, and his body was full of bruises. that was child abuse. And when child abuse goes unmitigated, when people don't have the ability to find pathways to hope, then that past can come up in really ugly ways in the future. And that's what happened in that situation. So we do know the science of hope can mitigate the effects of trauma. Of ACEs and trauma. In 2,000 published studies on hope, hope was the single best predictor of well-being. So let that sink in for a minute. 2,000 published studies on hope. Hope is the single best predictor of well-being compared to any other trauma intervention. So that's why I jumped in with both feet, because I know that situation where you have an ACE score of 4 or higher, you're 1,200 times more likely to commit suicide. A child who is low, this was done with 8th graders to 12th graders. A child who has low or no hope has a 48% suicidal ideation. A child with high hope, it's 12. So we can save the lives of children by giving them hope, by increasing their hope. And we measure hope using a validated hope index. So we know how to foster it, we know how to measure it, and we know how to bring up the children that have had these ACEs so that, and with their parents, so they don't repeat the cycle. That's the work that I'm involved in now.
Oh, man,
Silver bullet, awesome. Right?
Awesome. Well, I mean, it's crazy. And I, yeah, Mike, I agree. Silver bullet, right? I love that phrase, but I think, man, there's a lot of work there. There's a lot of work to get people to that point where they can make that change. And I'm like fired up with Mike's passion. You know what I mean? Like, Mike, you're so passionate about it. It makes me want to, get out and hit the streets and start screaming from the rooftops. But I want to circle back for a second, because you said something a little bit ago. You said, we all have a purpose in the world and we all have a reason to be here. And I love that thought. And I'm wondering where that comes from for you. When you say those words, where does that come from?
Oh, well, it probably goes back to what I was saying earlier with my mom or my grandma, where I was raised in a way that everybody was valued. You root for the underdog and you look for what's good in people. And not to say that people that I was raised with didn't say disparaging things or negative things, but really as you look at the whole gamut of it, right? I had a pretty charmed childhood, and I was able to see things in a very positive light with a support network that surrounded me. And most of the successful people now, I talk to people with high A scores all the time, with A scores of 10. Every bad marker, they were sexually assaulted, their parents were divorced, they had incarcerated parents, there's domestic violence, there was all the markers, and they're great. They're fantastic, very successful people, never been to jail. High A scores are not a death sentence. It's a way to say, what do you need to have happen in your life so you don't go down that road?
Yeah.
That's the agency, right?
Right. That's the agency.
It's not a death sentence. It's not like a victim mentality. It's like, I have an ACE score of 7, therefore my life is scripted.
Well, that's a fascinating study even of itself, right? Like a high ACE score, and how do you, how are you're breaking that cycle? I mean, I just think that's fascinating.
One of the keys, I think, to ACEs, and anybody who ever administers an ACEs assessment to somebody has to, in my opinion, my humble to be opinion, if I ruled the world, is they need to look at it with the lens that you're looking in a rearview mirror. An ACE score is not who you are. It's what happened to you. It's behind you. It doesn't have to be in front of you. You can let it control you, but you can also drive past it and just let it keep going.
It doesn't have to define you, right?
It doesn't define you.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking to kids, and I'm giving 13, 14, 17-year-old kids an ACEs assessment, their ACEs aren't done yet. I mean, they still have the ability to gain more ACEs based on what happens in their lives. But what I want to do is give them the strength and courage and pathway, if you will, and the agency to not let those things happen, that they can take control of their lives, and children should be heard and seen, So that's where that comes back to. But
see, I think the ultimate superpower for me is awareness. We talk about attitude, we talk about these things, but when when you inform and you teach folks about that adverse childhood experience, that research and the science behind that, that then gives them the awareness that they are standing where they're standing with that behind them, ready to move forward with that awareness to make some changes and like Tyler said, break that cycle. I'm curious, Michael, like when we talk about the hope, and you mentioned that that April's a big month in your world.
Yes.
Right. And we see pinwheels.
753 in front of the Wind River Mini Mart in Reading to signify each pinwheel was a substantiated case of child abuse. Yeah.
Let's let that sink. Right. Yeah. Let's let that sink in. So kind of going back to my exercise that I was telling you about, Tyler, right? 3 circles. I got a circle of control, right? I've got my circle of influence and I've got my circle of concern. What can we do in that circle of control to help that number go down? As Joe Schmo, citizen, parent, right? What can we do to help your cause?
Well, I mean, a simple thing all of us can do is recognize that children are in front of you. I once went to a State of the City luncheon in Reading, where the mayor, Ken Murray at the time, had his focus was on teenagers. And he brought in all the bands that came in from the different high schools. He had high school leaders all throughout this luncheon that was primarily business people. And at the end, he had all pre-COVID, of course. At the end, he had all the kids line up, and he encouraged the participants, the business people, to go up and shake the kids of each of the hands that were there. And I was shocked at how many didn't. That didn't want to acknowledge that the kids were there, that didn't want to acknowledge that teenagers were important in our world. And it's not, it's why don't they? I'm now intrigued then I was like, but now I'm intrigued as what happened to you that you don't want to engage with kids? And so one of the things in your control is to don't cross the street when you see teenagers, to avoid them. Walk head on and say hi to them. And engage them in conversation, not in a scary, creepy way. We got to be careful because of all that stuff. But, a lot of times, how many times do you walk on the other side of the street to avoid 5 teenagers walking together? Well, I always walk towards them and say, hey, how you doing? And sometimes they'll say hi back or nice dog or whatever. Sometimes we'll engage in conversation. Other times they won't even acknowledge that I'm there, and that's totally fine. So in most people's circle of control is what can they control in their work, in their home, and in their environment, right? So there's people like me who I can control what I do with my work, so I got into this profession. But there's people, not everybody wants to run a nonprofit for child abuse prevention. Not everybody wants to be an educator or inspire teachers and other people who work in the profession to engage with children more. But you as in the spirit of influence can talk about it with your family. You can ask your kids, what was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? Or my new favorite, where did you see hope today? So you can engage your kids in conversation, make sure their friends feel valued in your home, and know the kids in your neighborhood. That's a really simple takeaway.
Yeah. I love that. There's a video that's gone viral in my world, Tyler, of a particular school board member in your neck of the woods down there. They have student board reps, right? So student members sit on these school boards, and they were having this pretty passionate discussion about reopening schools. And he's on the mic saying, are we really going to put merit on the opinion of 2 kids? Are we really going to make a decision listening to 2 high school kids? You can imagine, right? You can imagine, like, who are you making decisions for? Why aren't we listening to kids, right? And my opinion is exactly that. Put them before us. Celebrate kids. Like, get involved with kids, because the business leaders of today need to meet those kids. And they need to engage with those kids. We are all invested in the quality of those kids. And if you treat them untrustworthy, they will prove untrustworthy. Right? They'll rise to whatever level you set.
I just go back to Mike, to your comments. It's like, what's the experience that why wouldn't they shake the hands? You know what I mean? That's sort of where my mind goes to. It's like, what'd you go through where that was like, I'm not going to do that. I mean, that's just an interesting thing.
Yeah, and we try to encourage our local media. If you're in control as a media person, do positive stories on kids, highlight what they do right, have a positive expectation of them. That's one of the 40 developmental assets, is a positive expectation, and it's okay to ask a lot of children because they're able to deliver. And if they're, in the school system, Mike and I were talking one time about the SARB system and how devoid of hope the SARB boards can be, school attendance review boards. And,
like Grim Reaper.
Right? It was like a firing squad. I mean, you'd line up 8, 9 professionals, people whose job it is to make sure kids are in school. You'd have law enforcement, judges, and school administrators. And, granted, that's what right? But it's devoid of hope. And then you have mom and child going, you did wrong, you're going to go to jail, all of the things. And they didn't say, well, did you have breakfast today? Did you have lunch today? Are you hungry? Is there something that we can do to make this more pleasant for you? How can we work together for a goal of getting your child to school? SARB can't set a goal for that child at 17 years old to go to school. The child has to set the goal to go to school. My dream is that every SARB or every school attendance review board is done in a teen center or a family advocacy center where the families are surrounded by resources. So when they're done with the SARB, they can go out and get a parent partner, go shoot some pool in a teen center, or find out what resources are available. That's my dream. I don't, is that a wish, or is that a goal, or is that hope? I don't know yet, because I have agency and I have a goal, but I don't know that I have a pathway to achieve that yet.
I kind of feel like you're, I love what you're talking about. And I agree 100% with you. I feel like, man, it's got to be frustrating though. I mean, you're working with the most vulnerable, trying to give them an opportunity to put themselves in a position of success, down the road, or whatever that's going to look like. And then you go to the SARV board. It sounds like, something, just the name itself sounds like,
Boom, boom.
They need to take feel like Darth Vader's going to come walking in, and
right. But they need to take a page out of Mike's playbook, right? Change the name, right? Call it something.
Amen. Yeah.
Call it something else, right? So Mike, I'm curious, like you talked about your mom and you talked about her influence and your grandma, but like, did you have a mentor? Did you have a community person? Did you have someone at church or a teacher or somebody take an interest in you? And
in high school, it was Mr. Milton. It was my journalism teacher. And I always tell stories on him. He was a really good man. He looked like Orville Redenbacher, to give you a visual. And he could have been his stunt double in any commercial. And that's
just so you know, I already had that visual when you said journalism teacher.
Yeah, and Mr. Milton.
Right. All of a sudden, I'm starting to picture what kind of stunts Orville Redenbacher was doing on those commercials. You know what I mean?
Surrounded by popcorn.
That's right.
But he was somebody who saw a skill or a talent in me, and I got to know what it was like to be valued by somebody outside of my family. I actually, in 1984, when I graduated high school, to tell you my age, was put in the Hall of Fame for service in high school. I had no idea it was coming. I had no idea that I had done anything to deserve that. But Mr. Milton had nominated me for the work that I had done with the yearbook and with the newspaper and the other things that I had provided, I guess, service for the school. And I was able to kind of pull a fast one on my mom, because I didn't tell her about it. I didn't tell her about the medallion I would get or the acknowledgement I would get. And she didn't get a program, so it wasn't in there. But, you know, I'm fairly tall in high school, and all the tall kids go in first because they line up by height. And I wasn't there. And she's going, huh, where's my son? And I come in the last 5 kids and sit right up front. And then, you know, they announced that I got this Hall of Fame Service Award. So Mr. Milton gave me an opportunity to shine. And that, you know, that's a good thing for a kid.
Yeah, it's a good thing for a kid. And it left an impression where here we are talking about that, right? And what Mr. Milton, and I think that all of us, I know Mike and I have had these discussions about people that have impacted our lives that were outside of the walls of our own homes, right? Because I think that's huge.
It's almost like we, you know, Tyler, we've talked, they loan us confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, they see something and they believe in us and they loan it to us, and we take it until we can stand on our own.
And currently that person at, you know, 45 years old, I think I first met Chan Hellman, and I'm 55 now. It might've been 48, 49. I don't really remember the exact year, but definitely he's a mentor. I call him my hope Yoda, and I made sure that was okay with him because he's a little shorter than I am. But he's taught me so much about not just the science of hope, but last year during COVID, he and I did several podcasts. We didn't do it at the level you did. I think we got to 6. And
that's a milestone, Mike.
Yeah, that's a milestone. There you go. And you can check them out on the Pathways to Hope for Children's YouTube page. But we sat and talked for a couple of segments just on what was hope, and hearing it from Chan and how he was inspired by hope was really powerful. And being able to look at a time during COVID, which was really hopeless. You know, we all can come out of this COVID-19 situation thinking our future can be brighter than our past, and we all take a role in making that happen, right? We all need that right now. And Chan's taken off now. I mean, he's doing trainings with SCOE. He's doing trainings all over the country. This hope theory is really taking hold. There's a book called Hope Rising, How the Science of Hope Can Change Your Life. And that was written by Chan Hellman and Casey Gwen. So you probably find it in the podcast notes that's attached to this podcast.
Absolutely.
But it's a very powerful book. And you can read about Chan's journey, about how he found hope. And it was one person in a conversation with somebody that led him down this road, that how can you be hopeful when things don't look really rosy? And I won't do spoiler alert for you, but what I did learn is that I saw that journey in kids at camp. My office is surrounded by pictures of kids at camp because I love being in that moment.
You know, Mike, as I'm hearing you, we talked earlier about building, and I have mad respect for builders, for people that build things. But as I'm talking to you and about the work that you're doing with hope, it's almost like there's the rebuilders. There's the people that take the broken. Anyone can talk about hope when it's sunny, right? Mm-hmm. When it's sunny and you're not hungry and you have a roof over your head, right? And you have all of these things. But as you get holes punched in that bucket and you're leaking out hope, how do you talk to that person, right? And say, tomorrow can be better than today, and you have something to do about it. One of the things that I had an aha moment as I heard you speak once, I've been guilty of saying, oh, don't worry, kids are resilient. They will bounce back. I bounced back. Kids will be okay, right? They'll land on their feet. They'll pull themselves up by their bootstraps and they'll move on and they'll be all right. They'll be fine as adults. When you hear that talk, I don't say that anymore, Mike, just so you know.
Oh, good.
You actually taught me that, right? But like, what do you say to that?
Well, I did that. I'd go travel around the country and I'd talk about either Camp Hope or Hope Theory or Family Justice Center or co-located service centers. But really getting into the work about children is I would stand in front of a crowd of 100 people, professionals, and say, kids are what? And they'd all say in unison, resilient. And I'd say, no, they're not. And then you could hear a hush on the crowd, and people get angry with me because they go, how can you say kids aren't resilient? And I go, well, hold on. Kids are resilient if they're taught resilience. You can't get a child through 17 years old and they haven't got caught for what they do, and they haven't got thrown in jail or juvenile hall. And then on their 18th birthday or 19th birthday, they get caught for doing something bad, for hurting somebody or something that can get them thrown in jail, and say, well, we're tough on crime now. They were resilient until they did this. No, you have to teach them pathways. We could be pathways to resilience for kids, for children, but you have to teach them resilience or it's not a given, right? You can't just say they made it to 18, they're resilient, and then the next day they get arrested and they're a criminal now.
I just wonder how we can foster this idea of hope. Like, how, we need peddlers of hope, Mike, get out there pushing it, and we need to have more people talking about that.
And not just that, but aware of the science of it.
Yeah. I just think that there's a lot of people that have that attitude that if a young person has made a mistake, then that's it, right? We kind of write that off. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it always blows my mind, because I'm always like, you were there once, right? I mean, at one point in time, you were there.
We were all kids.
Right? Like, why are we so quick to throw that out? How can we do that, Mike? What is there a way for us to be better at talking about hope in general?
One of my favorite YouTube videos is called The Lone Nut. And if you guys haven't seen it, you should watch it. And it's about this dude at a concert, and it's rattly, shaky video that was taken with an iPhone or Android device. And it's this dude, and this guy narrates this short video. It's probably 4 minutes long at tops. And it's about how being a leader isn't that important. It's how being the first follower is the most important role. So the leader, it says, and you see this guy out there, and he's just jamming at this concert. He's got the lawn area all to himself. There's no one around him.
It's like Woodstock, right?
He's just rocking and jamming. It's like a day on the green, and he is just doesn't care who's around him, but he's leading this dance. And then they call him the Lone Nut. And then next is this other guy comes, and he makes what he's doing valuable by joining him in dancing. And then shortly, you'll watch in the series of about 30 seconds, by the end of the song, the entire lawn is up dancing. And then the narrator says, and that's how you start a movement. It's not the lone nut. The leader will get all of the attention. It's that first follower that matters. And because a follower follows other people. And Chan has a saying that hope begets hope, right? So I'm a follower in this realm. I'm following Chan's lead. I'm following what I learned from Casey, and I'm trying to get as many people to dance with me as I can. And the reason being is because I've seen the results. I remember very early on, it was 2014. I was sitting in, we'd just finished up campfire, and we had talked with the kids, 50 kids that were under 12 years old, about what it meant to grow up in a home of abuse. Casey did the keynote, and he said, I put people in jail if in the name of for abusing their children, in the name of what happened to me, in the name of discipline. And it resonated with the kids. And one time I remember them saying, my dad beat me with a belt, and the kid yells, my dad does that too. And so we had this really intense campfire where because at Camp Hope, we don't just have a great time at camp. That does happen. But we also talk about the trauma and abuse they either witnessed or endured. And we talked about pathways to lead out of that, or how to mitigate what that was by maybe writing something down. We throw it in the fire, it goes into the Ethernet, whatever it is, right? We work with evidence-based programmings that helps them deal with that. So that night we came back from the campfire, we got everybody kind of settled down, and the kids were going off to camp. And, when you share that story, it gives kids permission to share. And everybody has a story, and it's their story to tell. So they started telling the stories to their counselors, and Kate Loudon came over to me. I just sit there sometimes and just watch the kids scurry about and get into their cabins for the night. And Kate sat next to me in 2014 and said, Mike, why did kids do things like this? I mean, why do parents, let me start again. Kate said, Mike, why do parents do things like this to their kids? Why do adults hurt children? And at the time I said, Kate, I don't know, but I'll dedicate my life to helping these kids and finding out a reason, a pathway forward or something. I didn't know what I was saying, back in 2014, that's a big statement. And I didn't really, I was caught up in the moment. Yeah, I was caught up in the moment. And then, fast forward to 2021, and I'm going, I think I'm holding true to what I told Kate. But the difference is in 2021 that I didn't know in 2014, I actually have an answer for Kate now. The parents and adults do these things to kids because of unmitigated childhood trauma, because they haven't dealt with their stuff and they don't know any different. It's with their go-to. So when you ask about how do we foster hope, we have to acknowledge that that's you take a role in making it happen. You have to acknowledge that there's something that needs to change or be done. When we see the aha moment when we're working with a family and they go, oh, I do need to get up on time to get my child to school. So I always give the idea. So in hope theory, you have hope as your goal. And right underneath hope on a 4-point scale is rage. And rage is when your agency, when you have a goal, but your agency or pathway are blocked. So take, for example, a 6-year-old little boy who's in kindergarten, and you sit down and you say, okay, what's your goal? I want to get to school today. He has a goal of getting to school because he loves it there. It's a really good time. Well, he gets up early. He makes himself breakfast. He gets himself ready. 10 minutes before school starts, he runs into his mom because she hasn't come out yet. She's still asleep. Maybe she's sleeping it off. Maybe she got drunk the night before. Maybe she's just not able to get out of bed. Well, now that kid's going to be pissed. And he's going to be full of rage, and he's going to take that rage out on somebody. Rage is good because rage you can bring up to hope fairly quickly. So imagine if that mom had gotten ready, then everything would go well. So right underneath rage is despair. And despair is when you have a goal, but you don't have an agency or pathway to get there. I see it a lot with the homeless. I'm not going to be homeless forever, but I'm not going to do anything today about it. And I'm not going to go get the help down the street. I'm just going to live in this kind of live for now, and yeah, I'll get out of it sometime. And then you have apathy, and apathy is really scary because it's when it doesn't matter, you don't care what happens to you. So cop killer, somebody who opens fire in a mall, they don't really care what happens to them. Somebody who sexually assaults somebody or a perpetrator of domestic violence, they don't really care what the outcome is, right? They don't have any goals, and they don't have any agency, and they don't have any pathway. So in that instance, the way to foster hope and to generate hope is, the opposite way of going up. You create those goals and you create obtainable goals. So we have a program called the Hotline for Hope, and people will call into that program, and they might just be at the end of their rope. So our goal setting with them might be for the next 30 seconds. For the next minute, what we're going to do is we're going to breathe together, and we're going to take a minute, and we're going to process what's going on. And we're going to say, it's okay for you to feel this way, and you give them permission. And so did we achieve our goal? Yeah, we did, because they had agency to want to get out of that moment. So then you, from there, you create future memories of success. And this is the key. So if we take this little boy who wants to get to school, and we ask that parent, and we work with him with the Hope worksheet. There's actually worksheets too. And
we'll include all of those in the show notes. I think those are valuable tools.
ChanHellman.com, you'll find all of this stuff. And so we work with the mom on the Hope worksheet, and we say, okay, what does it look like to you when your child gets to school on time? Well, Billy's a lot nicer kid when he comes home from school. He always gets his homework done. We don't have any arguments. He eats dinner. He goes to sleep early because he's tired. What happens when he doesn't? Well, then he's angry, and he's mad at me for not getting him to school at time when we butt heads. So let's create that future memory of success and say, okay, so what do you have to do to achieve that goal? Well, I can't get up early because I don't have an alarm clock. Great, we'll buy you an alarm clock. That's your pathway. If that's your pathway to hope, we will get you an alarm clock. You know what I mean? So what are the pathways, or what are the obstacles that are causing that mom not to get out of bed in the morning? If it's drinking, maybe, because that does happen, then let's unpack that. Why are you drinking so much? What are you what's causing that. If it's just, I was out with my friends for a night, okay, that's a short-term problem. If it's I'm hiding from what happened to me when I was 7, that's a much bigger problem. But you can see how now she's got this motivation to get up and get ready and get out of the house because she sees that it makes her son happier. And who doesn't want that for their children?
Okay, can you talk a little bit about that step, creating future memory of success?
Yeah. So, Mike, why don't you give me a goal? What's a personal or professional goal you have?
Oh, I got a personal goal. I dream of a day when I would step on a scale and see 200.
You and me both. Okay, so let's unpack that for a minute. Is that a stretch goal or is that a mastery goal?
That's a stretch goal, I think.
Okay, so what that means for your listeners is a stretch goal is something that's kind of hard or unattainable. I use the joke on myself, although I don't love basketball. At 55 years old, if I wanted to be, my goal was to play in the NBA. That's beyond a stretch goal. That's a wish based on what we talked about earlier. So in your instance, you want to get down to 200. I don't know if you want to say what you're at now, but
I'm at 229.
Okay. You and I both.
It sounds a little better than 229.
Yeah. Well, and 230. Gosh, you don't want to be 230 and go to the dentist. Dad jokes. Hashtag. So your goal is to get to 200. Okay, so that's a stretch goal. So what's a mastery goal? What's a goal that's actually attainable for you in your weight loss challenge? How about 218 or 217?
220 would be a huge success.
No, but okay, is that a stretch goal or is that a mastery goal? Is that something you think you can achieve within a certain time frame?
Yeah, I think I can get to 220.
Okay, so 220.
That's 9 pounds, right?
So how do you feel? So let me ask you this. So you're back down to 220. Think you just stepped on a scale. Maybe it says 219. Maybe you're 219.6, because I know you probably, like me, you got the 0.6 in there. And
do that. Come on.
Yeah. And you're 219.6. How does that make you feel?
I'm feeling pretty great.
And how do you think your body will react?
I think clothes will actually start fitting a little different at that stage.
And the clothes are fitting better. How does that make you feel when you go out in the world?
Yeah, I'm probably feeling pretty confident.
You like that feeling?
I'm pretty svelte.
Yeah, you're svelte. You're starting to getting rid of the muffin. So you're feeling better and right about yourself.
Yeah, probably got some more energy, right?
Right. You probably can get out there and make it into the NBA, or at least a pickup game with your buddy next time you see him.
Yeah.
So with that, so we've taken the goal from which was kind of a wish at 200 into actually something that you feel like you can master. So then I ask you, what are your blocks and barriers? What are your obstacles to get into 220?
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A is a good one. It's brand new in town. You got to wait 2 hours. I don't think it's worth it. But
yeah. Pepsi.
Slurpees
when the weather gets nice, Mike Burke.
Yeah. Right? So sugar.
Oh, sugar.
Yeah.
Sugar.
Right. So I'm feeling you. So what can you do? Like, let's take it down to another goal. How many days a week can you cut out Pepsi?
I mean, Tyler, how long you been off?
8 months.
Look at you. So I could definitely follow Tyler Gould's lead, and I could go a month without Pepsi.
Okay. So start off with
wait. Is there like a cheat day?
No, just start off with what you can accomplish, right? Future memories of success. You cheat, you're going to be like, oh, but if you have Pepsi 7 days a week, cut down to 5.
There you go. 3 days a week.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
So it's gone. You see what I'm doing with you? I'm kind of taking you through this blocks and barriers. So in the idea is that
and these are all on the worksheet. The worksheet guides you through this process, right? Yeah.
And what steps are you going to take? So there's like, you can put down, I think the worksheet has 6 steps. So you're looking at goal loss, 220, ways to get there, cut down sugar, ways to cut down sugar, less Pepsi, Great start. Let's see where we're at. Exercise more. Try to get to the gym 4 days a week, or get for a long walk where your rings are getting filled up on your watch, right? That's a big goal for me, is how many days a week can I fill up all 3 rings? Mm-hmm. That's why Apple invented rings, because I can visually see it, because I'm a photographer.
Right.
It did it for me. So that's how we do the worksheets with people, and that's how we foster hope. And when I came back to the community, as I mentioned, I knew we had pathways, but I didn't understand how to create agency. And so what I've learned by becoming a certified hope navigator through Chan and his group that's called Hope Centered and Trauma Informed, is that we can help people find the agency by doing what I just did with Mike. So Mike, next time, if he's having 7 Pepsis a week and he says he's going to cut down to 5, he's going to think about it, because he set the goal of doing 5 a week instead of 7. So he's going to achieve that goal much bigger than if I said, Mike, cut Pepsi out totally right now. My goal wasn't to have you cut Pepsi out totally, just cut back on it. Mm-hmm. I've gone to try not to eat ice cream unless I eat it out. I try not to buy it anymore. I'm not saying no. Yes, get it out of the house, because you know what I mean? So and then I think that the important part of this process is re-goaling. So you have your future memories of success. And what we did with you, Mike, is we re-goaled several times within that conversation to things that we could handle and things that we can master. And then when you have the goal, and then you have a pathway to get there, and you're the one driving that boat, you're going to be more successful. That's why we know a 2-point increase in hope. This is Gallup. This is a Gallup poll, and everybody trusts Gallup, right? A 2-point increase in hope in the life of a child is a letter grade. So we can take our D students and get them to C students by increasing hope. And the higher the hope score, the more grades are going to do. So in the workplace, a lot of people are really fascinated with the workplace, right? We know that a 2-point increase in hope is an hour of productivity with your staff. So a lower no hope individual will take them 8 hours to do what a higher hope person can do in 7. So there's a financial aspect to it too. Yeah. And if you think about Brene Brown, get her for one of your guests. That would be very wonderful.
We're trying.
It's only about $25,000 an hour, but she's amazing, right? She's worth every penny. But she has a saying, and much like Chan has a lot of great sayings around hope. Brene Brown says, you cannot give children what you do not have. When I took over at Pathways to Hope for Children, the Shasta County Child Abuse Prevention Coordinating Council had a collective hope score of 50.4. So on the hope continuum, which you'll see in your notes, 50.4 is the lower end of moderate hope. Lower end of moderate hope. So guess what kind of services we gave our community? Lower end of moderate hope.
Yeah.
And you only give what you got, right?
Right. You can only give what you got. So you got to look internally first, right? So that's why I encourage every one of your listeners to take their own hope assessment at chanhellman.com, see where their hope score is, see where they're coming in. And as I started this conversation, we can tell your hope score by the type of goals you set. If you're a lower hope person, you set avoidance goals like child abuse prevention. If you're a higher hope individual or organization, you set achievement goals like creating pathways. So Patty Price and I, who's my associate director, we created a pathway towards increasing the hope in our staff. And in the middle of COVID, so we took our hope scores in October of 2019, before any of this happened. We took our hope scores again in October of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, and we increased 6 points. So we found something here that's working. And you know what else happens when you have a higher hope workplace? You don't have turnover. It's very rare we have an opening.
Mike, I'm curious that I love what you're talking about. I love what you're doing. Organizations like this exist outside of where you're at?
Absolutely. As I told you, I used to work for Alliance for Hope International.
Okay.
Many programs around communities, entire communities. Tulsa, Oklahoma is a hope community. The state of Oklahoma hired Chan Hellman to open 70 hope centers throughout the state to help deal with COVID. because our future is brighter than the past. And we take a role in making it happen. We all need a brighter future out of this. And so the science of hope is being integrated all over the country. I know in Mississippi, Chan just did trainings with hundreds of people in Mississippi around the justice and legal systems. And so, yeah, it's all over. And it needs to be more places. We all got to join the lone nut and get out there and dance.
Yeah, I love that. I think, one of the purposes behind this podcast is to talk about being intentional in our own journeys to progress and become better. And I think that we have a lot of listeners that are going to hear this podcast and be curious how they can be involved as well in their communities. I mean, this is, we talk about being peddlers of hope, but there's a lot of good people out there that maybe don't have the knowledge that this type of an organization exists in their community. And we definitely want to raise that awareness.
Well, yeah. And I think that it starts with, like what Mike was saying, it starts with taking that score themselves. Right. Yeah. So we'll put it out there through all of our channels just to try to get people aware of where they're at.
And don't worry, we'll announce our hope scores next week on
good, I'll be listening.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you guys are high hope individuals just by what you do, in the way that you're curious and inquisitive, right? You set achievement-based goals. As Mike had an achievement goal. He wanted to be healthy. If you want to lose weight, that's kind of an avoidance goal. But if you want to be healthy, that's an achievement goal.
I love that.
That's almost like one of those wisdom keys,
right?
That Gary Miller talks about, right? Like the way you just position that language around the goal changes.
Yeah. I mean, how many people do you talk to that say, I want to lose weight, and they're just like, I cannot lose weight.
I can't do it.
Yeah. Or like, I want to stop wasting money versus I want to be
more frugal. I want to be right.
Yeah. I want to buy a house.
Yeah, I want to buy a house. Yeah. Right.
I want a better life. When we talk to children, what I always encourage families to do is what's positive. So the child doesn't want to flunk the test, right? So if their goal is, I don't want to fail, is why they're studying. That's not the same as I want to get into college or I want to pass. I want to do well, so I'm applying myself.
Yeah.
Well, if the school is setting the goal for the child's less likely to buy into that goal. Whereas the child setting the goal, then they're more likely to achieve it. So that's what I love about SCOE and Shasta County Office of Education diving into hope theory, because think about this continuum of care from the time the child enters TK or kindergarten. In our school systems, they're going to be exposed to hope theory as the educators and the people at Mike's level are being taught this idea of being hope navigators.
Right.
And then it comes out of the community to community-based organizations. And guess what? We're doing the same thing. And then can law enforcement do it? Tracy Neal, who's our chief probation officer, she was in the Hope Navigator training with us. And she's trying to figure out how can we bring hope into probation and juvenile probation in juvenile hall. They don't call it juvenile hall anymore. It's the Juvenile Justice Center. So how can we, in a power control environment, right? How can we bring hope in there? And she's, really seeking answers on how to do that. So we talk a lot about that.
Well, I love Tyler's word intentional, because that really is this podcast, and that is the community that we're trying to establish. Because I look at my own life, I think I'm an ACE score of 6, but it is, I would call it miraculous. I would call it the hand of God, where has helped me become where I am, versus you go back and turn 4 or 5 different switches a different way, I'm in a different place. Mm-hmm. Right. But I think that if we can arm people with the intentionality behind it, almost like you with your camera eye, right? If we're walking around now seeing opportunities to be those peddlers of hope, right? To engage with people that, one thing is like, cheer up the people you see that are, walking around with their heads down. But hey, go get them. That doesn't do it.
Mm-mm.
Right? But like sitting down and helping them understand what hope is and how we can foster it, how we can actually crank that dial up. I think that would be a power that truly could rebuild lives.
And that's what we're doing right now. I mean, you just made a really interesting point. I don't know if you heard it, but you could have had a lot of switches were flipped. You could have went a lot of different ways. In that statement, are you saying you were resilient or you had pathways to resilience?
Oh no, I had nudges.
You had nudges towards resilience. You weren't just automatically because you were a child going, everything's going to be great. Everything sucks. I got an ace graph. 6 of these markers happen to me, but everything's going to be fine. No, you had somebody nudging you, or you nudged yourself. It's okay, I think, for kids to have that internal motivation. At Camp Hope, we say hope is believing in yourself, others, and your dreams. That's what we define hope as in camp: yourself, others, and your dreams. And we ask kids every night at campfire, where did you see hope today? And they could be in yourself or other people.
Hey, Monk Manual, Stephen Lawson, add that to your Monk Manual page, right? Where did you find hope today? Where did you see hope?
Absolutely. And you'd be amazed at how rewarding it is for a child to hear another child say, I saw hope when my friend Allie helped me up the rope when I was going to the ropes course because I was so afraid to step on the ladder, but Allie was there to help me. And she cheered for me, so I knew I could do it.
Hey, Mike, we are believers in hinge moments, and you've kind of alluded to a couple of things. I think that moment with Mr. Milton and your that medallion around your neck and your mom, that was probably a hinge moment in your life, right? Mm-hmm. I think of that moment that your wife brought that flyer in.
Yeah.
What went through your mind when she throws that flyer on the table?
Well, first thing was, am I qualified for this? Am I qualified to start a co-located service center for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse when I have so far in my life been a photographer, an executive director for 1 year, and a marketing and media coordinator for a hospital? You know, but what I was I think in your circle, I was an influencer. And so first off, I thought, well, that was really great of her. She must see something in me. She must believe in me that this is something that I need to be doing. So I felt the calling to move forward with that and then just be who I was. And again, that definitely was a hinge moment getting this job. Would I have been sitting here today? There's a couple of things. One, if I wouldn't have got the flyer, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. Number two, when I was asked to start Camp Hope as a Shasta Family Justice Center by the same person, Angela McClure, I said no. I didn't even say no. I said heck no, because I had no bandwidth. I said, we are trying to merge with another organization. We're trying to grow a program. We started off with $60,000 in the bank and 3 months free rent when I left my, union job at the hospital, and that's all we had. And we left.
Sounds like a hustle, right, Tyler?
Yeah,
sounds like.
And left that job with a $5 million building being built. After we merged two organizations together and changed the course for survivors in Shasta County for quite some time. But with Camp Hope, I said no. And so that Angela convinced me to do it. She said, all you got to do is go stand up and talk a little bit. We'll come up with some programs. I'll raise some money and we'll go change the lives of kids. So I said, yes. And that pivotal moment taught me, don't say no, say how. Because once you say no, the door's closed. And there's another analogy, I don't know if you guys have heard, but they talk about the expensive services at the bottom of the cliff. So when people are in trauma, when people are hurting, when things happen to families and people, there's two different paths. So they go up the hill And if they fall down, that's where the ambulance, that's where law enforcement, that's where the jail system, hospitals, all those expensive, really expensive services are down the hill. And it used to be said, we need to build a fence at the top of the hill to protect people from falling down to these expensive services. That never sat well with me. And I didn't know why until I started the Family Justice Center. I don't want to build a fence. I want to build a bridge, because I want them to travel over those expensive services. I don't want them to fall down the hill where they need to access those services, but I don't want to stop them with the fence and not allow them to be themselves and go forward. So what the Camp Hope journey taught me was, don't say no, say how. And so that was another pivotal moment for me.
Well, and then even more importantly, as you talk to youth, you're cutting off that whole cycle, right? They're not even getting on the hill. Right. It's almost like that river. It's like we're plucking people out of the river. Well, why don't you go upstream and find out why they're falling in the river?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that working with youth and working with kids and honoring their value in the community only builds, you know, a stronger community.
And how can you have programmings for kids? How can you have programming for survivors or for anybody if you're not asking for their input? Like, we're building an app right now for teens. It's going to be called Teen Centered. And so I started off by interviewing 20 teenagers about what they want in an app that's meant for them to be in their hands. And who am I to think at 55 years old, I'm going to be able to figure out what they need in their palm of their hands? And so they gave us some great input. So we're developing that now. At Camp Hope, we knew early on the magic wasn't going to be me at 45 years old sitting inside a cabin with a 7-year-old. It's going to be a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old being in that cabin as someone they can look up to. And that's the model, is we have 17 to 26-year-olds in the cabins, depending on the age of the kids. And then we're there to support those counselors. And we do trauma-informed care with them. And we teach them about ACEs and HOPE. And they're the ones that are truly making the difference in the lives of the kids.
Yeah, you know, and I recently read that, right? Like a peer a couple years down the road is so much better than a mentor 20 years down the road.
Right.
You know, like the 20-year mentor is his insights will be faded and a little bit out of touch, where someone who just went through what a kid is going through can actually really make a significant difference.
Mike, we're big on honoring as part of this show, and you've talked about some people in your life. You talked about Mr. Milton. You talked about your good friend Mark. You talked about your mom and your grandma. You talked about your wife Roxanne. Is there anyone else that you'd like to take a moment and honor?
Well, I know I've talked about Chan and some about Casey, and I've talked to Gail, but I really think that Laurel Park is another one who stands out in my mind. Laurel is a survivor of childhood trauma who came into my life my second day on the job at the Shasta Family Justice Center and said, I'm here to help. And when we started the Family Justice Center, as I told you, we had $60,000 in the bank and 3 months free rent, and that was it. We didn't have phones. We didn't have internet. We had a couple of desks. And I remember getting the phone hooked up, and my dad was a telephone repairman, so I had a bunch of old phones. And in the closet, there was the phone closet. We plugged the phone in, and it had a bell. Remember, ring, 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 ring. It had a bell, and Laurel would run to the closet and say, Shasta Family Justice Center, can I help you? And Laurel's actually the inspiration for one of the programs that we're starting called Hope Park. It's named after her. Wow. And it's a program where I saw the power. Laurel was always involved with Camp Hope. And she's now 72, I believe. Sorry, Laurel, if you didn't want me to say your age. But at 63 years old, she was going whitewater river rafting with these kids on the Trinity River, and she was going on the ropes course with them, and she was having these high adventure activities and sharing in their pain at campfire and their progress and their hope and their positive outcomes. And I coming back to this job in 2019, Laurel came over and volunteered for us, and I'd watch her interact with the youth that I had actually hired to work with me, because some of my counselors became my staff, and they'd light up the room. Any room that Laurel was in with a child got lit up, and that child said, Laurel, oh, you're here, Laurel. And I just thought that's replicable, can we take more seniors 60 plus, older adults 60 plus, and put them in high adventure activities with teenagers, and then have the seniors or the older adults volunteer at the teen center after this experience. So that's our big experiment we're going to try in Reading with a teen center. So Laurel's pretty high on my list of people. And then there's some kids that just have meant the world to me. And I mentioned Kate earlier. There's a young lady that we had at camp that started when she was 8 years old in 2012. And she's been on this camp journey with us since then. This is going to be her first year as a counselor with us. And I think about her a lot as I struggled to say, what do we do with our kids after school? We know that 1/5 of all teenagers are arrested between the hours of 2 and 6 p.m. And in Reading, where I live, there's no place for them to go. We don't have Boys and Girls Club. We don't have a teen center. We operate a teen center in Anderson, so our South County kids. But I've had to focus on this one camper as I look at how can we start a teen center. And I know this camper loves Laurel also. And I'm looking forward this year as this camper comes back as a counselor and Laurel's there to greet her in this new role. And then after this summer, we hope to have a place for kids like this camper to come to every day, to have hope infused in their lives every day. So sometimes there's all kinds of people, right? Whether they come into your life for 10 minutes, like Chan did with the first person that I had told you about that you can read about in the book, or whether it's somebody in your life for your whole life, like my friends, or just a short time like this camper.
Oh, man, I love that. I can't help as you're talking about Laurel and her role, and I go back to that scene of the teens with all the business people, right? And thinking about why wouldn't they shake their hands? Well, the vision that you just talk about is exactly how we get everybody to come together, and I love that idea. It's powerful.
If the rooms were full of Laurel, she would have hugged every single child going down that row.
That's awesome.
Hey, Mike, no pressure, but when a guy is known for hope, how does Mr. Hope deal with life? Right?
Yeah.
Everyone's dealing with things. There are things out there to kind of rob us of hope.
Yep.
How does Mike Burke deal with that?
And
how do you deal?
Reciprocal, right? It goes up and down. We know that you might be high hope one day and low hope the next. It's not just a straight up trajectory that always is going to be high. Stuff happens in life and it can rob you of hope. One of the sayings is unmitigated childhood trauma is a hope robber. Things that pull you away from those goals or things that make you happy are things that rob you of hope. So the way I deal, I probably like everybody else, in the workplace, I try to have courageous conversations. For my own personal self, if I throw a camera in my hand, I'm in my happy place. You all seen Happy Gilmore. This is called Richest Men in Town. So we've all seen Happy Gilmore, and he's got his picture with his lady in it and bringing him drinks. And I've got my camera in my hand and I'm taking pictures, and it really does kind of mellow me out, and it allows me to have an unconscious consciousness, if you will, of just something I'm good at, that I feel like I can do. I have a dirt bike, so I love getting up into the mountains here in Shasta County and going for a ride. I think one of the main things that I do to kind of deal with the day is unpack it with my wife at night, sitting out on the deck or watching TV. Sometimes just spending that time having somebody safe that no matter what, I can unpack with if I need to. So there's lots of different avenues. I think that the camera, the motorcycle, I'm in a men's club here in town that gathers on Fridays, and to have that male connection, because I think that's important. I think a lot of times in this work, it's dominated by females. There's only one other male on staff with me, and I love working with women, but sometimes you need that outlet of just men when was the last time I sat for 2 hours on a radio program and just talked to two men about what it's like being a man? Doesn't happen very often, right? You guys do it every week, but it's rare for me. But I have an opportunity to do that in a group that I'm in here in Reading. So that also adds to my life in the richnesses that I have.
So Mike, really quick, we usually we get the paychecks, not literal paychecks, but after this episode and this conversation goes out to folks, we get the texts, we get the emails, and they are touching. Like I got goosebumps right now just thinking about that feeling every time that happens. Mm-hmm. And they'll be listening to you and they'll be thinking about their situation or maybe a mess that they're in, to the person. And I just want to emphasize too that 122 people commit suicide every day in this country. Mm-hmm. So we have a hope problem.
We do.
To the person that is running low on hope, that is listening to us in an effort to grab at something, what would you say to that person?
Life isn't meant to live alone. You're not alone in your journey. You're not alone in your pain. There's others that share what you're going through and to reach out for help. You're valued, you're worth something, and that you matter. I think that's the key, is you matter, that I see you. I see you for who you are and what you bring into this world. Sometimes those few words can save somebody's life. And then ask him, let's breathe together. Let's take a moment. What would make this okay? What would make it different? There was a child that came to camp. He's very near and dear to my heart. And he had a plan. He knew exactly how he was going to kill himself. He was tired of watching his dad beat up his mom. He was tired of watching his little brother get hit. And so he had a plan. He was going to roll himself up in a carpet, and he was going to go over to 299 and lay in the middle of the road and wait to get run over by his 18-wheeler. He wanted a big rig to take him out. That was his plan. And the only reason he didn't do it is because camp was coming up. And he knew he wanted to get one more year of camp in before he took his life. One more time with us. And that summer, we reached him. And we got to him and we told him he was valued. We told him he was worth it. And he changed his mind. You know what he did after camp? He came in with his brother and said, "We need help. Can you help my mom?" We empowered him. We saw him for who he was. This young man, 3 years later, keynoted a conference for domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse professionals at the Alliance for Hope International's Family Justice Center. Christian keynoted the conference about how hope saved his life. So if someone has a plan, let them know they matter. There's QPR training. There's a whole training, spirit, in your 3 circles, where am I going to be? Right. Not everybody has to be QPR trained. Not everybody has to know how to know the signs and symptoms, but basically if they have a plan, ask them. And if they do, take it serious. Don't blow it off. Don't think they're resilient. They're just going to get through it.
Use the word.
Yeah. I'm scared for you. I want to be here for you. Let's take the time and talk. Let's figure out a different way. Let's set a goal for the next 10 minutes. Let's set a goal for the next day. Checking in with you tomorrow. Checking in with you next week. You doing okay? Yeah. Okay. We'll get through this together. Christian's still in my life today. And I've told him, I can't imagine my life without you in it.
Well, Mike, I just want to point out that none of that happens if your wife doesn't bring that flyer.
Absolutely, 100%.
I love those choose your own adventure ideas, right? And the thinking of like our lives turn on these switches. And I'm so glad you did that. And I'm actually, Tyler, I'm thinking of Ryan Hall's dad, right? That thing. Right? Anyone can be good at something, but if you want to be great at something, it's about finding what you were made to do and doing that. And Mike Burke, you are made to do what you're doing, brother. And I've loved I've loved what I've learned from you. Every time I hang out with you, I learn. What gives you hope these days?
Well, sorry, I said we talked before about not saying you can edit it out. But really, what gives me hope and what gives me fuel is having a staff that's motivated to do what they do. Today we had 350 people come through a drive-through event. And I remember telling Eric, the guy I work with, who put it all together, I said, this is the fuel. This is hope fuel right here, right now, changing lives. You know, for me, it's camp, knowing I get to go to camp, knowing I get to spend that time with kids, knowing I get to watch them metamorphose and change and get through coming to, I've had kids at camp that thought they driving up there. What do you want to do with your life? Doesn't matter. I'm going to be dead or in jail by the time I'm 18. 6 days later, what do you want to do with your life? I want to come back and be a counselor and be part of this amazing world in this journey that I've had. That's not just one time. That's happened so many times. So to me, that's the fuel for work. That's the fuel, is that I think I did find my passion. That's my hope fuel, is knowing that I can be there to help others.
Mike, I've loved listening to you talk, and what gives me hope is you and people like you and the people that work with you that are dedicated to something, and to people that maybe they don't know, and they're willing to put themselves out there. We want to do whatever we can with our small platform to get the word out to as many people as possible, wherever they are, that they can be involved in organizations like this to help others. It's interesting. We get to spend 2 hours together, and I'm always blown away how fast it goes by. Our listeners might argue with me on that, but it goes by fast where I'm sitting, and I love it. The name of the podcast, The Richest Men in Town, we've talked a little bit about It's a Wonderful Life and George Bailey, and just kind of seeing life for what it can be. And when I watched that, Mike and I talk a lot about how the message of hope, right? When George finds himself on the bridge saying, I just want to live. I'm grateful for your journey. I'm grateful for your wife, Roxanne, for walking in with a flyer and putting that in front of you.
He knows me well.
That gives selfishly, that gives me an opportunity years later to sit down and talk to you. So I'm grateful for that. But we recognize, Mike, the richness in your life and all of the things that you've done. What does it mean to you to be considered one of the richest men in town?
Well, when you first say that, it seems a bit of a responsibility. Like, I got to keep this up. But then, that was my first thought is, oh gosh, if I'm this, then I have to be this. But what I've learned is that the label's not important, right? It's not the richest man in town. I'm just trying to be my authentic self. And I didn't really realize what that meant until I went on a journey with Strengthening Fields project, which was a project put on by Blue Shield of California, where I spent 2 years actually diving into that topic, where I learned what my white male privilege was, what I learned what it meant to have a meaningful work life and to really invest in others. And so I do feel like one of the richest men in town. I'm able to have my hobbies. I'm able to live my life. I'm able to help others find well-being and live a happy life. So I feel lucky. I feel blessed. I feel like that I'm surrounded by a network of people that allow me to have that title.
There's a lot of people that I think would echo that thought of being lucky and feeling blessed because of their interaction with you, Mike, and grateful for what you do, grateful for who you are, and grateful that you were willing to come and talk to Mike and I on this podcast, because for me, there's a lot of things I've written down today that I want to put into action in my own life. So I appreciate you immensely.
Well, Mike and I have the Mutual Admiration Society going, and now, Tyler,
yeah, but
you're added to it.
You gave some homework tonight.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for your time. I would be remiss. I've got a niece that works in your organization, Taylor Amshires, and she absolutely loves being a part of your team. So thank you so much for what you're doing for my hometown, for the community that we both live in, because it takes a village.
It does, and it matters who's in the village.
Amen.
Yeah. Love it. So thank you, thank your wife for the time that she gave up to have you with us for a couple of hours. So we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Keep doing what you're doing. Have a good night.
You too.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.